contemplating God Knows the Heart from Luke chapter 18, verse 1 through 15. Now, the longest book in the New Testament is the book of Luke. Now, you say, well, wait a minute. Luke only has 24 chapters, and Matthew and Acts both have 28 chapters each. So, well, how could you say that Luke is the longest book in the New Testament? Well, the answer is because it has more words. It has less chapters, but more words than any other book in the New Testament. By the way, does anybody know what the second longest book in the Bible in the New Testament is? Yes, in the New Testament. I'll give you a hint. It's also written by Luke. The book of Acts is the second longest. The third is Matthew. Matthew and Acts, both 28 chapters each, but Matthew is just a little bit, by just maybe 50 words or so, Matthew is shorter than the book of Acts. And so in the book of Luke, Luke communicates many, many stories about Jesus and many of the parables of Jesus that might not even be included in Matthew or Mark or even John, because John only includes like 7 and Luke has more parables of Jesus than any other of the books recorded. And so today we are going to be looking at one of Jesus' parables from Luke chapter 16. And Jesus continues to tell stories that the common people are happy to hear, and the Pharisees and Sadducees and the lawyers, scribes, those who are looked up to for their religious authority, they feel squeamish. They feel like they are being attacked. And the reality is Jesus is telling these stories, and they all know I'm the bad guy. Jesus doesn't say, often, sometimes he does, but Jesus doesn't often say, you Pharisees, you Sadducees, but usually he just tells a story, and the Pharisees and Sadducees are mad because they know this is about me. And so this is one of those stories, only Jesus told his disciples about a rich man. And the idea is that we need to stop judging by mere appearances. Instead, we need to judge correctly. In other words, we're not supposed to look just on the outside. We are supposed to look at, as much as is possible, the individual's heart. On Thursday, we concluded a series of Bible studies on the subject of don't be angry. And we contemplated the dual reality that whether or not someone is nice to us or bad to us doesn't have anything to do with whether or not we get angry. It's a choice. But on the other hand, we also, if someone is angry with us, we have to do what we can to help alleviate that anger, to restore a right relationship. So we can't just say, well, you took offense at it, so it's not my fault. No. There's a twofold responsibility. On the one hand, don't get offended, don't get angry. On the other hand, if someone is offended or angry with you, do what you can to restore the relationship. And one of the things that we do when we are getting angry is we judge by outward appearance because we cannot see the heart. But God, he does see the heart. And so we need to apply the biblical principles concerning interpersonal relationship if we are going to live a life that is actually pleasing to God from the heart. So, Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because you cannot be manager of mine any longer. So now he's like, you're going to be fired. He didn't say you're fired, pack up your stuff and get out of here. He said, I'm going to relieve you of your position as manager. But he's still the manager. This is one of the reasons companies today, when they fire someone, they say, pack up your belongings, security will help see you out. And they lock them out of their passwords and everything because revenge, you know. And sometimes people who are fired, they do damage to the company as they are on their way out. Well, kind of, because the guy who hired him, he's like, give an account of your management because you can no longer be my manager. But the manager, he said to himself, Oh no, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. I can't do manual labor. I've been sitting in an office my whole life. And I'm ashamed to beg. I've been a guy who tells people what to do all my life, and now I'll go around begging for money from people who knew that I was a wealthy manager in an elite position. So he says, I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtor. Remember, he's not fired yet. He just knows he's going to lose his position. And he asks the first one, how much do you owe my master? Well, 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. And the manager told him, okay, take your bill, sit down quickly, make it 450. Half price, discount. The guy's like, whoa, you know how much money you just saved me? Then he asked the second one, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, well, take your bill and make it 800, 20% discount. Whoa, you know how much you just saved me? Now, you would think that the master would be angry with his manager for discounting his debt that he was owed. But the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. He did something that was within his authority as manager. He did not steal, he did not lie, he did not cheat. He did something that was within his authority as manager, even though it was self-centered, even though it was geared to protecting his own at the expense of his master. What he did was legal. And Jesus tells this parable by summarizing and saying, here's the point. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. He says, we got to be careful because we have to be, as we'll see in just a little bit, wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Yes, we have to do everything that we do genuinely and from the heart and out of love. But we can't be stupid either. So Jesus said the people of this world are more shrewd in their dealing with their own kind than are people of the light. I tell you, now he's going to apply it more specifically. Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And you might say, well, wait a minute. Isn't that manipulation? Isn't that what that guy was doing that was bad manager? He was doing what was legal. No, Jesus is saying, look, you now have been entrusted by God with plenty of food, clothing, finances. Yes, you might have to work hard for it, but you have what you need. Your needs are met. If you see someone else who is in need, such as, for example, Anderson and Dacia, who had a fire last week and lost everything that they had. If you see someone who has need, then he says, use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. He says, look, if the evil manager will cheat legally, but he will defraud from his master for personal reasons, why would we as godly individuals not act in love and use our worldly possessions for the benefit of those who are around us? This is a story of dramatic contrast. It's not saying be like the shrewd manager. It's not saying that. It's like if the shrewd manager knows how to use money for his own benefit, why would you not use money for the good of others who are around you? Because you say, well, how do you know that that's true? Because Jesus continues. And in verse 10 he says, whoever can be trusted with little can also be trusted with much. If God can trust you with just a little bit, then God can trust you with a lot because he knows that you're going to use what he gives you wisely. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Whoever is going to live for self only, not care about living a life of love and generosity and compassion and kindness, they can't be trusted with true wealth. So he says, if you're going to be trusted with a little, you can be trusted with a lot. And if you can't be trusted with a little, you certainly cannot be trusted with a lot. God's not going to bless you with plenty if you don't prove yourselves trustworthy with the little that you have. There's a limerick in America that goes something like this. It's not what you do with the millions if riches should e'er be your lot, but what you are doing right now with the dollars and quarters you've got. In other words, we dream big about, if I won the lottery, I would be kind and I would share it all. And if I invented something and got lots of money, then I would share and then I would be kind and then I would know. Jesus says if you're not going to be trusted with a little bit, you're certainly not going to be trustworthy if you have a lot. So, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. You cannot say, I love my possessions and I love God also. It says, no one can serve two masters. Why? Because either you will hate the one and love the other. This is dramatic contrast continued. Okay, dramatic contrast means words that are exaggerated for effect. So either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. You cannot say, my number one goal in life is to please God, while living, my number one goal in life is to earn money, to get more money, to get possessions. And here it is, the Pharisees, who loved money, heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. And so he said to them, remember up to now it's Jesus telling his disciples, talking to his disciples. But the Pharisees hear this and they're like, wait a minute, we love God and we love money. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. You might justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. Why would something that we value highly be detestable in God's sight? If it is something that replaces a right relationship with God. If we love money more than we love God, if we love things more than we love our Creator. Now, there are about 5 things that we can apply from this particular passage, which we're going to delve into very quickly today. The first is, of course, the observation that we are called to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. In other words, don't be stupid. Have a heart that focuses on pleasing God. But don't be stupid. So, you remember, Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 was telling the people about having a genuine heart of love. And he said, if someone smacks you on the left cheek, turn the right cheek also. What he was saying was, don't have a heart of anger and bitterness and pride that gets offended if someone hits you on the cheek. Be willing to accept wrong rather than do wrong. But that doesn't mean you can't duck. Okay? That doesn't mean you shouldn't get out of the way. Jesus is only talking about your heart. Okay? So if someone smacks you on the left cheek and you're like, oh, that's okay. And then they smack you on the right cheek and you're like, I'm not going to get angry. And they try to smack you again, back up. Don't punch them. Don't get angry, but don't stand there either. Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves is the idea. And so from verses 1 through 8, Jesus basically gives this parable where the rich manager was he probably audited his books and realized that the guy was probably embezzling. Embezzling is when you take money that belongs to the company or the business and spend it on yourself. And he was a manager, and so he had control. He had been entrusted with the control of books, but the master probably realized, wait a minute, he's keeping a little bit too much for himself. So we're going to remove him from his position and put somebody in there that we can trust. The master was not stupid. He was wise. He saw what the manager was doing, that he had trusted, and he decided to remove him from that position. What's this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you can't be my manager any longer. So the manager, he's like, oh no, I know what I'll do. So that after I'm fired, people will say, oh, hey, you got fired for that? I'm sorry. You gave me that half-price discount and your manager, and then your master fired you? Oh, man, here, come over for dinner, you know. Here, you can stay in my room if you want to. Oh, you gave me a 20% discount on my wheat, and then you got fired? I'm sorry. You come on into my house. Right? And so he said, 900 gallons, give half price. He says, you got what, 1,000 bushels of wheat? Make it 800, okay? I'll give you a discount here. He was using his master's money for selfish reasons. Now, remember, Jesus is not saying be dishonest with what you've been entrusted with. It's the opposite of that. He's using dramatic contrast to say, look, if a guy who has no ethics, who has been embezzling money, uses his master's money for his own benefit and benefits himself, then the master is going to say, wow, I should have fired you right away. I shouldn't have left you in the position until I could find somebody else. I should have got rid of you right away. Good job in taking care of yourself at my expense. Now, Jesus is going to say, therefore, you, his disciples, need to be careful to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Because Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Jesus is saying, look, I'm going to send you out. People are going to persecute you. People are going to reject you. People are going to despise you. He says, don't go to places where they're going to throw you in prison and kill you. Avoid them if you can. Be wise as serpents and then harmless as doves. Don't have a heart that says, I'm going to take vengeance upon you. Remember when Jesus in his travels was asked, shall we call down fire from heaven and burn them all up? And he says, no, that's not what we do around here. Be innocent in your heart. So he says, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves, therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. But when they arrest you, don't worry about what you have to say or how you're going to say it. At that time, you will be given what to say, for it is not you who will be speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. If you allow God's word to permeate your heart, and you allow God's Spirit to guide your thoughts and your feelings and your actions, then God will take care of the results. So be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Number 2. Be wise with what God has provided to you, both here on earth and with eternity's values in view. So the two things are this. The wise here upon the earth and with eternity's values in view is this. Tuesday night finds my mom and me at Tatya about 4:30. Why? Because between 4:30 and 5:30, the vegetables, fruits, and meat, most of them go on sale half price. And so, doesn't it make sense if you're going to buy fruit, vegetables, and meat anyway, that you go at a time when you know they're all going to be marked down and you can get a good deal on them? That's what being wise with what God has provided to you here upon the earth. If you need it, and you can get it half price, why go at a different time and pay full price for it? But also, with eternity's values and views means, okay, look, I saved half price on that. I can buy twice as much and give it to my friend, give it to my family, give it to my neighbors, okay? Because you just saved half price on that. And you were going to pay full price. If you were going to pay full price anyway, that means you could buy double what full price would be, and now you can take half of what you bought and give it to somebody else. Because we're supposed to be wise with God, what God has provided to us both here upon the earth, so that we can be trusted, we can be trustworthy of God's provision. Because if we're trustworthy with a little bit, God will give us more. If we're not trustworthy with a little bit, God's not going to give us more. It's surprising how much God gives when we're willing to be trustworthy with what he has provided in the first place. So, two things. Be wise with what God has provided to you both here upon the earth by not spending frivolously, and with eternity's values in view. Now, I know that you guys are all professional here, living here in Japan already. Okay? And I know that there is a honeymoon stage for expatriates, people who come from other countries for a job in Japan. And what I have noticed happens is this. So you have people, primarily my experience is from people from the Philippines and people from Brazil. But both do the same thing. What happens is you come from a lifestyle that doesn't have a lot of extras, doesn't have a lot of luxuries, okay? You all know this. And then you get to Japan and you get a job where they're paying you as much per hour as you made all day long in the country that you came from. And so now it feels like I've got lots of money. And so I had friends that I knew in Brazil who came to Japan, and they spent, at the time, this was like 35 years ago, at the time, they spent a MON 2000 on a brand name pair of jeans. True story. They spent a MON 2000 on a brand name pair of jeans. I never spent more than 2,000 yen on a pair of jeans. I look for the sale prices and then I have a discount coupon, and then I wait for that to go on half price, because it's the same jeans anyway. You might as well buy them cheap, right? As to pay a lot more for it. They'd pay a MON 2000 for a brand name, just same jeans. They're going to wear them the same amount of time. They're going to go bad just as quickly as the 2,000 yen pair. But they had this money, and they're spending it on self. Now, in the honeymoon stage of being here, it happens just about every single time. There are also people who are on the opposite side. I have a friend in Nagoya. Went to, they're no longer here in Japan, but they went to my brother's house, the church. And they would live on almost nothing. They would eat only rice and a little bit of vegetables and things. And they would send 80% of the money that they got back to their own country to support their family. And so they did absolutely nothing. They were so generous that they were sacrificing themselves in order to provide for their family back home. God gives us things for us to enjoy. The issue isn't bad guy, you're spending money on yourself, good guy, you're giving it all away. No, the issue is, are you being responsible with what God has given you? Are you balancing what God has provided for you here upon the earth, and you're living for eternity with eternity's values in view? So he says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. In other words, he says, don't just selfishly use everything for yourself. Take into consideration the needs of those who are around you with what God has provided for you. So, dramatic contrast, once again. If a selfish manager knows when to do nice things for others for his personal benefit, shouldn't we be willing to do nice things for others for the sake of doing God's will? Because Paul wrote to Timothy, who was a young pastor who was going to go through this same temptation, and he said, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Other translations will say the love of money is the root of all evil. And there's a whole theological debate as to whether the intention was every evil comes from a love of money, or all kinds of evil stem from the love of money. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. But you, man of God, flee from all this and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. And then Paul goes on to say, now there are going to be people in the church who God has blessed with material possessions, and they're going to be rich. And he says two things about those who are rich. Very interesting observation from verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or put their help in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Whoop! What? What did that say at the end there? Why does God give us stuff? For our enjoyment. That is a part of the blessings of God. Things that we have for our enjoyment. So if you want to move up from a 32-inch TV to a 65-inch TV, hey, if you have the money for it, God gave you the opportunity to buy it on sale. then if that's what you really enjoy, God gave you the money for it's what it says right there. God richly provides us everything for our enjoyment. The problem is things should not be the only source of our enjoyment. Our enjoyment should also come from helping our neighbors, blessing those who are in need. Our enjoyment, our genuine enjoyment should be when we are able to help people who are in need. We mentioned a minute ago that my grandkids and Stephanie and Kyohei, they're going to be going down to Chiba. I think they're going to go to Disneyland and Disney Sea and stuff like that. And so since they were leaving to go to that trip this morning, I went to the Seki Church and I called each of my grandkids and I'm like, here's a little spending money, here's a little spending money, here's a little spending money. Why? I love seeing my grandkids' happy faces as they are making plans to go have an enjoyable time together with their family. And I love being able to share, to help them to have. Remember, God richly provides us everything for our enjoyment, and part of our enjoyment should be providing for the needs of others. Rejoicing in our ability, because of the blessings of God, to help those who are in need. And so he says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous, and willing to share. If a person is rich, yes, God gave you everything for your enjoyment. Granted. But you should also do good by being rich in good deeds, generous, and willing to share. So be wise with what God has provided to you, both here on earth and with eternity's values in view. Number 3, everything we have has been entrusted to us by God and is to be used according to the values that God commands. The reality is, you might say, I worked hard for my money. I worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for this money. And God says, why do you think you have that job? Why do you think you have the salary that you have? There is nothing that we have that we did not receive. Yes, God calls upon us to be industrious. If you do not work, Paul wrote into the Thessalonians, if you do not work, you should not eat. Be responsible. Don't live off of other people's generosity all the time. But even if you do work, it's a gift from God. Everything we have has been entrusted to us by God and is to be used according to the values that God commands. Does that mean that you should not buy a new car? No, buy a new car if you have been blessed with the ability to do so, and you're not robbing other people in order to do that. You're not defrauding your children of good food. Then if that's something that God has blessed you and you're able to do, buy a new car, buy a new house. There's nothing wrong with using what God has blessed us with for our personal enjoyment. As long as we understand that everything we have has been entrusted to us by God and is to be used according to the values that God commands. So he says, remember, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will be dishonest with much. So, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Paul wrote to the Corinthians, and he pointed this truth out, that yes, even if you worked hard for your money, it's still a gift from God. And he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, for who makes you different from anyone else? And what do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as though you did not? Everything that we are, everything that we have, the strength and health that we have to be able to work is a gift from God. And so, we're all the same. No, it's not like one person is special and the other person is not. We're all the same. We all are in the same boat, and everything that we have, the richest person in the world, Elon Musk, I'm not sure where he stands right now, but one of the richest people in the world, Elon Musk, everything he has is a gift from God. So there's nothing to boast about. Number 4, anything that we love more than God becomes an idol to us in our hearts. The question isn't what do we do with what God has provided. The question is, how affectionate are we to what God has provided? How much do we love the pursuit of things that then supersedes our love for God and our desire to do what He wants us to do? Anything that we love more than God becomes an idol to us in our hearts. In other words, we live in Japan, and in the Philippines they have this too, and I know in Brazil with the Catholic Church they have this too, but we live in a society where we see people standing before a statue going like this, you know. We see them bowing their heads and praying to a statue or an invisible idol that is represented by a shrine or a temple. But there has to be something. I remember when we were applying for our religious incorporation, the guy who was handling, the guy at the Kencho, the prefectural offices, who was handling the religious incorporation paperwork, they had to check all the lists of, do you qualify for religious incorporation? And so one of the things was, what is it that you worship? And I said, God in heaven, the creator of all things. And he says, yes, but what in your church is it that you worship? And I'm like, God in heaven, the creator of all things. And he's like, no, but what? There's something that you know, you go to church to worship, right? And I'm like, yeah. Because they could not fathom there not being an idol in front of you to which you bow your head and worship. Because this is not a monotheistic society. This is a very polytheistic society and a pantheistic society. And so pantheism means everything is God, or God is in everything, and polytheism is there are many gods. Okay? And Japan has both of them. So monotheism means there is only one God, creator of heaven and earth and all that is therein. And he couldn't even fathom the idea that there's nothing that you physically have to touch that you worship. And finally, I said, okay, look, we believe that the Bible teaches that God created everything. And so we worship him as a creator. He sent Christ to die on the cross for our sins because we had sins, and I gave him the whole thing. And finally he's like, so you don't have anything that you pray to in your church? And I'm like, that's right. Okay. So he wrote it down. Okay, and we got religious incorporation, so we qualified even without the idol. But we think of, the point is this, we think of an idol as something that you can see and that you put your hands toward to pray toward. But that's not necessarily the biblical definition of an idol. Of what Jesus is saying here. That anything that we love more than God becomes for us an idol in our hearts. Why? Because it takes the place that belongs to God in our hearts. So he says, no one can serve two masters. Again, dramatic contrast. Hate and love. It's not saying you're going to hate God if you love money. No. He's saying compared to what belongs to God, it's going to look like you hate God compared to your love for money. No. The reality is your love for God should make it look like you hate money. No one can serve two masters, and will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And the Pharisees, who loved money, they heard all this and they were sneering at Jesus. What an idiot. Like, what else is there to live for but money, man? There was a totally foreign concept to them, but the people loved it because they had a desire to love God and to serve him with all their hearts. They just didn't see that in action in their religious leaders. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus was talking about the things that we tend to worry about. And he said, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, and about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? This is what the Pharisees laughed at. Of course it's not more than that. Nice clothes and nice place to live and wealth and good food, that's all life is all about. And Jesus says, no, it's not. He says the pagans, those who reject God, run after all these things. For someone who does not have God in their hearts, obviously things are all you have. And your Heavenly Father knows that you need what you need. But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and then all these things will be given to you as well. Matthew chapter 10, then we continue. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. He says, you think that true happiness is found in stuff, in status, in fame. But no, that's a recipe for unhappiness. So he says, if you find your life, you get status, you get fame, you get wealth, you lose it. But if you're willing to lose your life for my sake, that's when you find true joy, true peace in life. So anything that we love more than God becomes an idol in our hearts. And finally, number 5. It is easy for us to justify ourselves before others, but God sees the heart. So we were with the college kids, and I asked the same question that I asked you a couple of weeks ago to the college kids. It says, when husband and wife argue, who wins? Usually. And they all, they didn't want to be unkind, but eventually they're all like, oh, the wife. Yeah, it's the wife. It's the wife. And I says, no. I said, when a husband and wife argue, they both lose. Nobody wins when you're fighting with each other. And it's easy for us to justify ourselves and say, but I'm in the right. And God sees the heart. God sees when pride creeps in and starts justifying that which we know we should not be doing. And it's easy for us to justify ourselves. Here's what Jesus said. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves. Remember, they were sneering at Jesus because he said, don't love money first, love God first. And he said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. You may be acting like you're godly. You may be acting like you're spiritual. You may be acting, and everybody may think that you're a really godly individual, but guess what? God sees right through that, right into the heart, and he sees that you love stuff more than God, even though you act like you love God more. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. So, if we buy that new car and wash that new car and keep that new car just as clean as we possibly can and just talk about that new car and, invest little accessories for that car, and that car becomes everything, God says, wait a minute, what about your family? Wait a minute, what about your friends? Wait a minute, what about your relationship with me? See, what people value highly is detestable to God because it eventually replaces that relationship that belongs to God. See, even with a good heart, we can be doing that which God does not approve of. So, maybe we should also be considering the other person's heart. I missed a T there, sorry. Maybe we should also consider the other person's heart. In Romans chapter 14, we read, by the way, Kyohei preached on this very subject this morning. Romans chapter 14. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. So this is a guy who has a good heart, right? And he says, God created everything. There's no such thing as idols. And even if meat has been sacrificed to idols, there's no such thing as idols. There's no such thing as gods except for the Creator God. So who cares where that meat went before I ate it? It's just meat. And so the one who eats everything must not treat the one with contempt who does not. There are others who say, look, I used to be a part of that religious group. And I know that meat that was sacrificed to that idol then received the blessing from that idol in the hearts of the people. And so that when the people ate that meat, they were partaking of the blessings of that God that they served. And so if I eat that meat, I'm going to be acknowledging an idol, and therefore for me that is idolatry, and so I can't do it. And Paul says, look, the one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does. God has accepted them both. Why? Because God sees the heart. God sees the heart of the guy who says, I'm not going to eat meat because I don't want to worship idols. And God sees the heart of the individual who says, there's nothing wrong with me eating meat because there's no such thing as idols. The issue is God sees the heart. And you can both have different beliefs and both be right. Why? Because God has accepted them both. That's why you're not supposed to judge each other, even if you have different value systems. He says, who are you to judge someone else's servant? Every one of us, who are we servants of? People sometimes ask me, so who do you work for? And I'm like, God. No. Who's your boss? I'm like, God. Like, no. Well, who tells you what to do? God. See, we are servants. Every one of us are servants of God. And so we're not supposed to judge each other because the only person that matters is our relationship with God. So he says, to their own master, servants stand or fall. And by the way, they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. See, God says, you don't want to eat meat? Good job. Thank you for taking a stand. And you want to eat meat? Good job. Thank you for acknowledging me as the only God. Okay. And God says, good job to two people who have diametrically opposing belief systems. Why? Because both of them, their heart is right with God. One person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own minds. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord. And whoever eats meat does so to the Lord, for they give thanks to God. And whoever abstains does so to the Lord and gives thanks to God. For none of us lives to ourselves, and none of us dies to ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. God himself should be the focus of our hearts. Not, hey, what are you doing back there? Not, I don't think your hair should be that long. Not, I don't think you should be having those piercings. No. That's between them and God. And they know what it is that they are doing and why they are doing it. We look at the outward appearance. God looks at the heart. So it's easy for us to justify ourselves before others, but remember, God sees the hearts. And it's easy for us to condemn others, to judge others, but remember, God sees the heart. In Luke chapter 10, we read the story about the guy who wanted to justify himself. Remember? What's the greatest command in the scriptures? What do you think? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's right. What was the next question? But he, wanting to justify himself, because he hated the Samaritans, and he hated the Gentiles, obeyed God, but hated the Gentiles and hated the Samaritans. But he wanted to justify himself, asked Jesus, I know we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves, but exactly who is this neighbor that we're talking about? And in reply, Jesus said, okay, here's a story for you. This is how Jesus taught. And they knew how it applied to them. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. And so too a Levite. Remember, the two people who their offices were the spiritual needs of fellow Israelites. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, pass by on the other side. But a Samaritan, the hero in today's story, the guy that this Jew is saying, who's my neighbor? Certainly not a Samaritan. A Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity upon him. Not like the priest or the Levite. And he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine, and he put the man on his own donkey and brought him to an inn, took care of him all night long. Next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. You see, he didn't care so much about money as he did the individual needs of those who were around him. Hope you don't have the car windows open. He says, I'm going to pay for the guy's hotel bill and medical bills when I get back, if it's more than this money that a couple of days' wages that I'm going to leave with you. So Jesus says to the guy who says, who is my neighbor that you're telling me I got to love like I love God? And Jesus says, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber? The priest, the Levite, or the Samaritan? And the expert of the law, he couldn't even bring himself to say it. He's like, the one who had mercy on him. The guy who had a heart of compassion and kindness and acted accordingly. Well, Jesus said, okay, you go do that too. If you see someone who has a need, do what you can to meet that need. It's easy for us to justify ourselves before others, but God sees the heart. In Psalm chapter 44, verse 20, we read, if we had forgotten the name of our God, or spread out our hands to a foreign God, would not God have discovered it? Since he knows the secrets of the heart. Rise up and help us. Rescue us because of your unfailing love. God knows the heart. God loves us. He wants to bless us. He wants to give us that of which we dream. He just says, when I bless you, make sure you have a heart that is willing to do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. Because this fulfills the law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself by doing to others what you would have them do to you.